Not ready to start Galicia. I got a response which kind of surprised me. Just my mindset wasn't in this place, which is that this kind of game, just like, you know, those SPI games and Avalon Hill classics and whatnot, serves as a nice gateway into wargaming. There's no question there. Somebody was saying, hey, they were just starting and they were really interested in seeing, you know, interpretations and whatnot of it. I don't think of that because, I don't know, it feels like that was a time gone past. And so, like, I have thought about that with when I looked at the games that I started on and you know, try to promote them as you know, good entry points. But all those games are, or almost all of them, are way out of print. And you might see some reprints by Decision Games, but with something like this, you're looking at something that is similar to one of the very first games that I had, which was the Tannenberg one by SPI. That was a little bit more complicated, I think, and it was a little bit of a stretch for me. So this might be at a little bit better level. Okay, so one of the first things to look at, since we do have some people newer to wargaming, I probably shouldn't have glossed over the rules as much as I did. Take a look at the sequence of play. Russians go first. That I found a little surprising. I was expecting, well, you know, the Austrians have the invasion here. Now, for solo play, playing with the counters all upside down doesn't quite work, because I want to be able to make my thoughts carefully. So I'm going to unflip everything, and I'll be back after I'm done with that. That allows me to see the entire situation from that player's point of view. You can't do this in opposed play, though, if you're playing with hidden counters. The big difference between the two ways of playing is, with hidden counters, I don't know what I'm hitting. Especially at setup time, I have no idea, other than the size of the various armies that I'm facing, how things are dispositioned. So making a guess as to which column on the CRT I'm going to be able to hit, I'm not going to know until I declare my attacks. However, playing with all your counters face down is going to be a tricky situation. This is why block games were invented, so that you can see your counters and your enemy cannot. Consideration here is, I see the Russians as generally on the defensive, at least at this point in the war. They haven't gotten all their pieces on the board. On the other hand, they're facing not that much less than what they have to begin with. So the question becomes, well, what do I want to do? And one of the first questions is going to be, do I want to entrain anything and try to make a major shift in where my reinforcements are? This area of the map is unimportant. There's nothing of value there until I get down to here. So I can probably ignore that while I have less pieces and focus on defending up here. But I may want to make a more aggressive stance. Do I have any desire to attack? An attack heading down this way might help cover, or it might help take a space like this. It doesn't matter what I take early in the game, as the Russians. There's two things I have to do. I have to try to have the most territory and best kill ratio, etc., by the time the game ends as a whole. And I have to prevent Conrad from getting to as many of these as possible. Oh, sorry, that one. Because they're worth a lot at turn 12, at or before turn 12 if he reaches them. I'm a little less worried about the setup positions. There's only so much I can do about them. So one thing to do is consider, hey, do I have any defensive positions I want to get to? And there are answers that are yes. I want to get into these fortresses or else be ahead of them as soon as possible. So I'm going to do some of my movement in order to get me into that position. If we look at the terrain effects chart, we notice something kind of surprising. Forests have no effect on movement. However, they do have a combat advantage. So I will move some of my units forward. So here's the problem. Using that rotating, I say 45 or 90 degrees, I'm probably going to rotate 180 degrees for disruption. Because as I move a unit, I like to indicate, hey, I've moved these units by doing something like this. Otherwise, it's very easy, even with a smaller number of units like this game has, to lose track of which pieces you've moved, etc. Couple of key factors. You'll notice in a lot of cases I set up every other hex. That tends to work pretty well when there's zones of control that are similar to the type in this game. That's just something that you learn sometimes through a lot of trial and error, sometimes just by running into someone who points it out to you. That is the strongest way to kind of design a line in this kind of game usually. So I'm just kind of following that, more because of habit than anything else. Now, swamp is very expensive to move through. If we look that up, that's 2. So I'd rather not go through that. And these cav out here. Get this disposed, and I'll just continue along the way for here. But up here I've got questions of, do I want to try to pick off an enemy unit? That requires more of a concentration of my force to try to knock out an enemy stack or push one back or whatever, which weakens my overall defensive position. So I'm going to have to think real hard about that, but I'm just going to move these guys for now. Positioning these, which are just trying to rush forward, and in part, these fortresses are important because I think I'm going to have the Austrians destroy fortresses when they capture them, as opposed to, as the rules are written, which is that only when the Russians capture a fortress, no matter what its nationality, is it destroyed. Because I really don't like the idea of the Austrians getting an advantage from them, but the Russians not getting an advantage at all from destroyed Austrian fortresses. So there's just something that bugs me about it. It just doesn't make sense. Okay. I started moving these forward instead of preparing myself for an attack, which might have been a good solution. I'm looking at, geez, there's a lot of ground I got to cover between these two armies. I kind of want to cover it rather than try to get some kind of advantage by hitting a stack with what might be like 2-to-1 odds. If we look at 2-to-1, well, that's probably going to result in a retreat, and maybe one that's not in my favor. If you look at the Russian attacks, you gotta kind of get, see here, so what gives you column shifts? The biggies for the column shifts that are going to be in your favor are artillery surrounding. I'm trying to figure out why you would get to a +3. I don't remember that. There. Let's see. Hungarian, a mixed force, Hungarian and Austrian could get you to a 3rd one. I think that's going to be about it. All DRMs. Oh, you want minuses. That's what it is. Okay, so it's very easy to get to a 0. +3 is fairly easy to get to. Forest and swamp, artillery, etc. So yeah. And again, you know, you've got the 9 or more. This is probably 0 or less, because it would be possible to get multiple minuses as well. But anyway, the odds required, let's take a look at what the what we'd be looking at. At 2-to-1, 1 through 6 would get retreats on a 1 or a 2 for the defender, attacker retreats pretty much down the line the rest of the way. There's no reason I want to do that, you know? So where does an attack start getting good? Well, honestly, I'm not going to cause casualties. I can get exchanges on the bad end, strangely enough. Exchanges might be a good thing, right? I outnumber the opponent. I'm destroying some of them. I don't know. But otherwise, it's mainly going to be retreats until I'm hitting like the 6-to-1 table, where I have a 1 in 6 chance of eliminating an enemy without any additional modifiers surrounding, etc. If I look at the Austrian side, they're a teeny bit stronger maybe, but it's essentially the same kind of chart. You need ridiculously high odds to destroy an enemy unit, or to have them surrounded so that like they can't retreat. If we look at the retreat rules, you must avoid the enemy zones of control, otherwise you're eliminated. So the only way to destroy things in this game seems to be to get things surrounded. Okay. So I'm not going to be able to weaken the Austrian position very much, and I may actually throw my own into retreat. For these guys, things get a little more interesting here. Up here, oh my. Why, hello. You found something. Okay. I mean, this is better than the game, right? Not used to them. They don't come up to the door in the same way in the living room. Anyway, for these guys, the terrain that's forward is less valuable. Here, I've got swamps and forests and whatnot that I'm able to position myself in, and that may be helpful overall. For these guys, I don't think I want to fall back too much, but I would like to get myself some space from here. So what I think I'm going to do, this is kind of useful because of the river line. It's possible for the enemy to get to here or here, but they can't get into this hex without moving through a zone of control. So they'd be attacking across the river from either of the hexes they can reach me from. This gives a little additional advantage. This gives me some strength in the forward. Here's a problem. Leaving 2 hexes in between allows the enemy to slip through a little bit more easily. But I think I need to do that. And the reason for this is to get myself a little bit more space so that any retreats that I face are going to be less problematic. Now I've got over here where, again, it looks to me like I'm going to want to occupy some slightly more defensive terrain in all cases. This is problematic, but I have a strong unit there. I'll move right up against the enemy. There's no harm to doing that. And, well, this isn't going to do me much good, these pieces. They're kind of weak, but they provide a little additional support. If this unit is going to be attacked, if these guys are going to attack it, they have to also attack that. So I think that's probably for the best. So that's the first movement phase. Now, this is going to be handled more quickly normally. I'm going to rotate all the counters, including ones that didn't move, because now unrotating them indicates that I moved them. I'm not making any attacks, and now I'll further fill in my defensive position. 1, 2, 3, and I can just flip the counters completely over at this point because they're done moving. If they're going to fight, I'll leave them face up. To this level of detail on, you know, exposing how I'm positioning the units and why through most of the game. But that, hey, beginner type thing, having that brought back to mind, I am going into a little bit more here. So these guys have positioned themselves in such a way that they're trying to stay to good terrain. They're really not in a lot of danger. The Austrians aren't going to be able to attack them right away. But this little bit of a gap here, I could try to fill this in, but I got extra units coming around this way. So I don't think I'm going to, because this line is already fairly thin. So, for example, this unit, I will just close him off. Now, there's some danger of Lutsk being exposed. The Austrians aren't going to be able to get there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If they had some cav there, for example. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But they could put it at risk. Lightning dashes like that are not going to work in this game. I can guarantee you that. It would take a lot of cav to push something through like that. And I'm almost certain that the Austrians aren't prepared to do that. If they did and left, you know, some cav exposed back here, the Russians could fall in and cut it off from its line of supply and possibly even surround it and get some pretty good results against it. I forgot is these little reserve movement points. There's a couple of places where, hey, maybe I couldn't move into a swamp and I should have saved a movement point or something, but I can only do that with one stack, so it's not going to have a whole hell of a lot of influence on the game. That's the end of the Russian turn. Didn't do a whole hell of a lot here. Straighten the lines up a little bit to make them a little bit better. Found a little bit more defensive position. Notably, I didn't move into here. There's no advantage to being in a town or city in this game. Usually there will be one, but absolutely none in this game, so I'm just going to leave that open. I can always fight my way back across it if need be. And that is the end of the Russian turn. I go on to the Austrian turn, and I'll be back a little later. Starting the Austrian turn, I've revealed all their pieces except the second army. I'm not flipping that over for various reasons, because first thing I have to do is look here. The start of the game prior to the Russian player's first movement phase. Yeah, I should have already done it. Oh well. On a 1 through 3, I can move next turn. Otherwise, it's turn 3. I don't have an easy way to remember that difference. Okay. So they'll be allowed to move next turn. But they can't do anything this turn, and that's fine. Now I have to figure out where and how it's kind of worth attacking. This guy was placed here. He's this incredibly fast infantry unit. I don't know what the hell they are. It says Pol L. It might be Polish Lancers, might be Polish landwehr. Most of the L's are landwehr, but they have a little symbol as such on them. They're not cavalry, but that may be that the Polish Lancers were especially effective as infantry or as non-cavalry. Rivers cost additional to move across, so I'll go 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm not going to be able to break a rail line here. That might be of some value. This guy, his job is to go take kills, and then maybe head back and do something. He's just not that powerful a unit. Other units I have to make some decisions on, though, and I'll try to keep you apprised as to what I'm doing. But remember, I have to get some pretty damn good odds or outflanking for anything to work in this game. The thing the Austrians did was, or the Russians did by moving up against the Austrians here, is now they put this unit in a zone of control. I can't just move to here to try to get some kind of better flanking situation. But I think with these units in here, I might be able to push another unit in here and get... no, because then I'd have to attack this with a soak. Yeah, that's just too powerful a line position. So I may have to fall back and try to hit maybe this unit or something. But again, it's very hard when you have every other hex, and certainly with every hex, to really push a lot of force against the enemy, the kind of force that you need to push the enemy back. Using cavalry might allow me to probe and decide whether or not to launch an attack. Of course, if all the units were face up, I could figure out whether or not I wanted to launch the attacks before I move the pieces. Later in the game, I may end up leaving pieces face up just because the hidden pieces are kind of a heavy burden. And they lose some of their value. So what happens is, and this is especially true for me with solo play because I wander away and go do something else. I want to watch the Addams Family again for whatever reason, which is kind of an iffy thing because watching a bunch of them at once, they cut the same scenes in. But, and you just see how cheap the production effort was in some ways. But the thing is, I have no knowledge of what any pieces are when I start using inverted counters. Less knowledge than I would sitting in an opposed game, which means that this kind of complete blindness is in play for the whole game if I play with inverted counters. Whereas that probably isn't really the case. You know, I should have some idea of where I have localized strengths and everything, but I put too many breaks in my play. My first movement, I push up a little bit here, trying to keep a defensive line here, prevent these Russians from... It's not a great line, though. I mean, there's a hole in it. It's not going to serve the way that the Russian lines are holding. Other places, I'm positioning myself for a second round attack, and we'll see how that works out. I'm not going to make any attacks there. Similarly, around here, I'm going around the flank trying to get an attack on this unit, but I am going to launch an attack here, and you can notice I kept some units in reserve. Basically, if I can push this out of there, I can get a fairly massive attack on the flank here, and then start chipping away at the Russian flank. That's not going to work very well if I can't move this, though. So I'm going to declare an attack here. I have no cav. I have 19 strength points. Oh, shit. No, I'm on that unit. Damn it. Oh, fuck. Yeah. I mean, I could do 3 one-to-one type attacks and hope to budge things and move shit. But that... I gotta think this again. I thought I was getting an advantage there, but I'm not. Fuck. Because even if I make some attacks, those units become disrupted and will not be allowed to exploit the attack at all, other than through advancing after combat. Oh, man. I really don't know how I'm going to break through this. I may just launch a bunch of moderate odds attacks very shortly. In which case, I go here. These guys already moved. I'll hold off because I need to move this into play. I don't like this. I don't like this, but I feel like I have to try to get some kind of advance at this point. So I'll make some kind of crappy attacks on the flank and hope for the best. Oh, I've not made the situation terribly better. Here I've opened up some space. I'm launching a bunch of attacks all along the line. I put a rail cut in here. And by the way, these rail cuts, the only reason that this is an optional rule in this game is counter mix limitations. You know, it costs X amount to print a certain size counter sheet. They tried to set the games at that certain level. It maybe felt that rail cutting is not as important in this, and it doesn't look as important as it would be in Tannenberg, the East Prussia game. However, this is one I really want to do, so I pulled out the East Prussia counter mix and am using one from that. I mean, eventually it wouldn't be a big deal because presumably if you like the system, you're going to have all 3 games in it so you can play the combined game. Although, well, without the Tannenberg map, I can't tell you for sure, but I doubt that they actually connect. And the Serbia is definitely going to be quite a bit further south from this map, so it will not connect, which means there's probably going to be some kind of off-map movement, or else it's just how you disposition your forces among the different maps and a set of victory conditions between them, because they didn't have much effect. The three campaigns didn't have much effect on each other. The biggie was what the initial plan really was. All right, so let's start fighting. Well, let's go over here. And here I'm in the woods. This is 10 strength points of Russians, but they have no line of supply because I've cut them off. Versus 10, 16. So that 10 gets halved to 5. We end up with a 3-to-1. I've got a -1 for the, am I right about combat here? I think I am. Yeah, it's halved. Okay. So I've got 3-to-1. I've got a -1 there, but the forest adds 1. Surrounded. Flanking is another -1. So it's -1 +1 -1. Nets out to a -1 on the 3-to-1. And I roll a die and see what happens. And this is my best attack by far. Oh, and I get a nice roll. So a 1 on that is the defender has to retreat 2. The defender cannot retreat without going through an enemy zone of control that's not protected. So these 2 units are destroyed. Now, that's 10 victory points. Playing with the optional roll. Let me just create a victory point section here. This is from a different game. And we'll give Austria and Russia. And Austria has just picked up 10. And now I roll a die for how many turns later each of these units comes back. Where it comes back, I don't know. I'm going to just pull them off from somewhere off map, I guess. So 1 turn later here. 1 turn later there. So very little effect in terms of the forces, except that they got flung back quite a bit. And am I doing that correctly? I say recommended. Yep. Okay. Now, I've captured this hex. I'm going to move this force forward there, and I've opened up one hell of a gap there. I'm going to launch an attack here. I have only 12 facing 7. No real modifiers here. I've got Cav involved, however. So I can do Cav retreat before combat. Attacking Cav, which successfully, okay. Let me find it. Attacking Cav may also choose to retreat before combat using the same procedure. And the key to this is that I don't have to follow through with my attack. So, how far do I retreat? I didn't do any forced marching. Probably fine. Where is this? I don't know if I have to roll a die because I'm facing some Russian Cav. This isn't clear here. Attacking Cav may choose to retreat before combat using the same process. So I assume, yeah. So I would need a 1 to 3 to succeed in retreating, I guess. I do succeed. I can only retreat the Cav. I can go 2 hexes. I will just go 1, and these also are done, and these guys are both done. I'll be back in a minute. Not so good, again, and I knew this was going to be the case. I've got 17 strength points with an artillery bonus versus 9 strength points. Again, both sides are in supply, so no advantages going on there. Shitties. 9 strength points means that I'm looking at a 3-2. So because 2 9s would be 18, I'm 1 short of that. But 9 plus 4.5 is 13.5. I'm above that. So I have no cav, so I'm going to be attacking at 1.5 to 1. The river has a +3 DRM. I didn't realize that. And I have -1 for the artillery, so I'm at +2. This is not going to go well. I roll a 5 total because of that. And I get an attacker has to retreat 3 hexes. The defender can advance. Do I want to? I think I will advance as far as here. The reason being, this puts me in a good position to maybe launch an attack in this direction. I've got a lot of space up here I could give up before anything important happens. Now we come over here. Now, I've got 2 attack. This is going to be my soak-off attack, but it might not be that bad. I've got 2 attacks that I kind of have to make before I do that, though. So I'm going to do this one first. Got Cav involved, so I'm at 16 to 4. That gives me 4 to 1 odds. The river, I've got units across the river that are attacking, so that's no problem. I do not have them surrounded. So I think it's just a 4 to 1 across the board. They're in a forest. That gives them +1. With a 3, not a bad roll. The defender has to retreat a space. Now, there's only one place I can retreat to, which is back here. And the attacker can only advance into this space. I'm going to advance this way because that keeps this flanking force a little bit more mobile. I still have choices, but note, these guys are in supply, tracing through that hex. I do believe, though, I could get the flanking attack bonus by attacking with both of these against here, or in fact, if just this, oh no, because this is not attacking, so no, I won't get a flanking bonus. All right, we're not going to be able to cut supply on these guys, and I must attack them. And if I throw these into this, I must attack here. So, do I have any cav anywhere? Probably not. Whether or not that obviates my attack requirements, I assume it does. All right, I'm going to go against these, I guess. That's 9, 17 to 11. 11 5.5 is 16.5, so that's a 3 to 2. There are no modifiers on this. But I get a terrible, terrible roll of 6. On the 3 to 2 is an attacker has to retreat 3. Fall back in that direction. These guys could advance. Again, I think I'm going to, because I think good stuff is happening for the Russians over here, because this attack still has to be made. And that's going to be 10 against 8. 8 plus 4 is 12, so this is a 1-to-1 attack at +1 due to the forest. This was the soak attack. I wasn't expecting this to go well unless I ended up surrounding that unit. So I get a 6 on the 1-to-1, and that is not good. The attacker's eliminated. And so that's 10 points for the Russians. And we roll to see when the Austrians come back. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And again, I have no idea where they come in. Not specified. And 4. That's the end of 2 rounds for the Austrians. So we go back here, and it looks to me like they've probably lost the game on those initial attacks. I certainly don't feel like I've done better than historically at this point. Sure, I've advanced a little bit into things, but the battles did not go terribly well. This unit just got attacked, yeah. And then we'll be over on the Russian side of the turn. Here we are at the start of turn 2. We've got these Russians coming in. We've got 2 more replacements coming in. I flipped everybody face up just so that I can operate them properly. We got these 2 more replacements coming in. I don't know where to bring them in. The rules don't specify. Logic says probably it's intended that they come in off the edge of the map. Any restrictions on that? I don't know. Because, well, let's look at reinforcements. Let's see. Because the second army here comes in, but it has no reinforcement hex. So let's see if there's anything that says anything about that. The only thing that I know of is units from the 8th and 9th Russian are set up adjacent to their entry hexes on the map and enter the game on the 2 marked. All other units are placed on the turn track on their appropriate turn. I don't think there's anything that says where they come in. And that would, of course, if there was, apply to the replacement pieces. So let's try to use some logic here. The very first thing that comes to mind is, yeah, they come from off-board, and you might want to limit it to, well, with the replacements, they should probably come in near the army that they're related to. How near, I don't know. But, you know, here I've lost 2 units from this red 5th Army. Sorry, I'm having trouble reading. The printing is not as sharp as it is in some games. So I would think somewhere back here. And that would make sense. You know, I got flung back. I've got to reorganize. The movement on board might represent some of that reorganization, etc. But you run into a bit of a problem when you start considering the Austrians, where the edge of the map for them is quite far from the battlefield. So they're going to have a harder time under that kind of implementation. On the other hand, without any kind of direction, I can't say like 5 hexes from another unit, you know, or behind the lines from another unit or something like that, or even just like with another unit of the same command. Any of these would make sense, right? It's just not specified. And it's one of the feelings I kind of get from this game is that it feels a little half-baked. You know, a really nice map is done. It looks like a significant amount of effort was put into a lot of it. But then there's just this kind of, yeah, why wouldn't this be nailed down? Why wouldn't you express this? Which feels really, really odd to me. Anyway, I'll start moving my Russians, and I will just bring them on at the edge of the map, because that is the most likely intention. Anything else I feel like would have had to have been expressed, except maybe with another unit of the same army, or next to a unit of the same army. I don't know. This out because as I start breaking up, and I think there's other cases of this, the 8th Army a little bit before I bring it on. You know, there's like an infantry unit here that's a 3-3 strength. I'm kind of like, well, should that be Cav? And then there's a 4-2 Cav unit. I mean, what the hell? You know, it just feels really like some things have been done that are odd. And again, I don't know if those are errors. This would be way too much Cav, I think, unless we're talking about a Cossack army here. And then, you know, why do we have these? Why is this so slow? I don't know. I'm just going to go with what we have, but these are, well, 2 of these 3 are brigade size as opposed to division, yet. And that might explain why they're a little faster, a little smaller force size. But again, that doesn't have any impact on play. However, I'm trying to come up with some kind of rationale why those are faster. But then we have this Turkish division, I guess, unless... Certainly not tanks. That's a little faster. Well, maybe because it's Turks. I don't know. But slow Cav? What's that supposed to be? Maybe just with a big tail or something. I don't know. But I don't have a lot of assurance that it's not just misprints on the counters, you know. A far distance to travel with some of these units. I'm going to want to entrain some of them. I already moved a couple of them on board. Although they shouldn't be flipped over. They should just be tilted. Costs 1 movement point to entrain, but it can start that way. Now the rail capacity for the Russians is... roll a die and do something. Halved, rounded up. So the Russians have a rail capacity of 1 unit. This. I'll bring it in. Now, doesn't pay entrainment, but 1, 2, 3. So, by the rules as written, I can move infinite and then spend 1 movement point to detrain, and I would not get any more movement points. So basically, units could entrain, entrain, move as far as they like along your rail net, and then detrain. That's in contradiction to that, though. There's a rail movement cost here. I don't know which one to take. Feels like it would be easier to make the mistake of not accounting for this than the mistake of having accounted for that and then withdrawn it later and just not represented it on the board. But again, not a very solid effort in a lot of ways. So I'll come on. 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 1 movement point. I'm close to the enemy, so I'm gonna detrain. Well, I wouldn't actually have to. I could move a couple more hexes, but I don't want to do that. What I haven't used is that forced march, which gets you like 1 extra movement point. And there's places where I might have wanted to do that, but I haven't yet. Moving next to the enemy, it doesn't cost me. I don't have to worry about, hey, my next movement phase in the same turn. So yeah, I'm just doing force marches wherever applicable. So I just brought all these in with force march. And you can see not much advantage to using the rail here. Might have been if I had driven down to here, but I'm a little worried about the 2nd Army making a dent, but this is one hell of a big force, this 8th Army coming in here. I reserved a couple of movement points on this force, and I'm basically poising myself, or putting myself in a position where I have capability to smash things here, maybe up here, and maybe some unit over here. What's kind of weird about the reserve movement, it really doesn't fucking make that much a difference in this case. It can be used if I make an attack in the 1st round, but here I'm just trying to keep a little bit more flexibility on this unit because I don't want to make a decision yet as to what I'm going to do with it in the 2nd round. That's a misuse of it, really. What it doesn't do is it doesn't allow you the defensive reserves the way that you have in the operational combat system, which I kind of like the idea of reserves being useful either for, for either use, either offensively or defensively. I feel like that kind of flexibility is available on both sides. And the war is still mobile enough that defensive reserves should have mattered here. Okay, not going to launch any attacks on this first movement phase, so I go on to the second. I decided to go with a more cautious approach with the Russians than I was kind of considering. Not making attacks along here, just keeping the defensive line there, but trying to destroy the Austrian, I don't know, Third Army, Eastern flank, whatever. Let's make this attack first. I definitely want to at least try it. I got 8. I got Cav, that's why. 8 and 6 is 14. Hitting a mere 2. That gets me 6-1. I've got him outflanked, so that's a +1. And that's it. That's pretty good. I'm sorry, a -1. Which makes exchanges less likely, but okay, whatever. -1 is a 0. That's going to be a defender eliminated. So 2 more victory points for the Russians here. It's all about encircling the enemy, right? And a couple quick die rolls for turn. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. I don't know what the hell those are. They're like non-army stuff that I was just using to protect the flank. That was a hit on here. I could advance. I think it weakens my position to make an advance there. Over here. So I need this unit to attack here in order to get the outflanking bonus. Over here, I've got everything covered, I believe, for the flanking bonus. Let me make sure, because it's a weird situation. I may have to dispatch a unit from a unit into each attack from that hex. I'm allowed to do that. So let's see what the flanking, how the rule is actually written, because it may be a little different than I expect. Oh, that was actually against only 1 strength point. I forgot supply. Let's see. Where's flanking? Flanking, when all hexes adjacent to are either occupied by the participating attacker or in the zone. Okay, so yes, I cannot use this against, I cannot use this entire stack against one of the two. I have to split it. It's a pair of 5s, so we'll use one of that. So that's 10, 15, 21 against 3. There goes the dummy if I want to bring him back in. And he comes in as a reinforcement, whatever that means, which I think means he comes in from off map. Okay, so what did I say ahead? 15, 21 to 1.5 because I've got no supply line. Which is 6-1 at least. The swamp gives a +2, but the flanking gives a -1. So we're at +1 on the big table. That's a 4 on the big table. That's a defender retreat. Defender retreat is sufficient in this case. That's why the exchanges are bad. Therefore, this will get destroyed. That's 3 more victory points for the Russians. I think the Russians are winning this big time. Just because I made those initial attacks with the Austrians. I don't think you can really afford to. I don't know what that all means. And we'll make our advance. Now I got an extra 5 strength points coming from here that I didn't allocate. So I'm looking at 15 and 8 is 23. All Hungarians. 23 to 4.5. It's 23 to 5, really, you round up. So that's 4-1. Surrounded means it cancels out the forest. So we're just at 4-1 here. We want to retreat. That'll destroy them. And I think we got it. We got a D2 there that wrecks them. And that's another 9 victory points for the Russians. Now, of course, if these units were destroyed permanently, the Austrian army would be in a lot of trouble at this point. Although I think Austria is in a lot of trouble, period. All of these, I can flip them. I'll be back in a moment. Let's take a look at the situation here on the Austrian turn. Second Army is coming into play. Try to throw it into place to defend against here. Let me look a little here because there's a little bit of a worry, right? I might have stepped on one of these hexes and now I have a victory point from it that I don't have a way to mark. I'm going to probably have to get some kind of counters or something to delineate this kind of thing. In addition, I own some of these hexes. I don't know exactly which ones, and I can only trace supply through the ones I've walked through. So like a Russian moving into here would break my line of supply, which is a problematic thing about one unit wandering off on its own like this. That's why most games don't have something like a hex control for every hex in the game. The games that do have it tend to be very, very tiny. This is a relatively large map to have that kind of concept in play that, like, you know, I'm leaving behind some sort of garrison there, and there's no abstracted forces that are moving around and maintaining my supply line. It's only abstracted forces in the hexes that I've actually occupied. That I see as somewhat more troublesome. And then the Cav also has a restriction on that, where and what is Cav and what's not, you know, by the NATO symbol or by the movement allowance. Yeah. Now, was that an optional? I think that was an optional. Yeah, the Cav Hex Control is an optional rule, but that makes it even more problematic, right? They have to spend an extra movement point in each hex, which makes them incredibly slow, right? But it means that you can't even accomplish raids with cavalry without throwing them out of supply. Okay, you can't do anything with your cavalry, basically, if you play with that rule. So I'm not sure that that rule should be in play. Anyway, yeah, I'm not feeling a hell of a lot of love for this right now, and there are a couple of things. One is it's a fairly simple adaptation of, you know, operational games that have been around for a long time. I don't feel like there's all that much that looks all that different. Yet I'm getting results that, because of the harshness towards the attacker of the combat results table, that I don't feel are historically believable. You know, I'm not getting the advances with the Austrians, etc. Now, I've made mistakes. There's no question. Perhaps rules ones, but certainly in terms of my tactical implementation, I probably shouldn't have attacked with the Austrians. Of course, historically, they could attack. It's looking to me like in order to manage an attack, you really, really have to be able to get that surround and destroy situation. Anything that you're not cutting the line of communication on the enemy, at the very least, in order to have their strength, anything that you're not getting bonuses on the combat chart or really, really high odds, which generally happens by surrounding things, you're probably not going to want to make the attacks. That's why a string of attacks along here did not go well for the Austrians. Whereas, you know, if you look at the historical situation, Conrad's plan was horrible, yet he made some advances in it. And I feel like that sort of loose attitude towards moving forward and attacking did not work at all. It did not work at all. And I feel like what I've learned is that the Austrians cannot do what they did historically. Instead, they should be defending right from the beginning and hoping to lure the Russians into a trap. Now, it is also possible that I'm just not getting something about this system, that there's some key little subtle thing that's going on in it, due to the combat charts, whatever, that maybe I could have done something better. Obviously, I'm blind to it if that's the case. So, I can't say, well, how likely is that? One thing that I found kind of cute, though, is these couple of dummies here. They kept the Russians from pushing forward. Of course, that wouldn't happen if you weren't playing with the hidden counters. I have a new dummy to come on. I guess it comes on somewhere at the edge of the map, and it's pretty damn obvious that it's a dummy because there were no reinforcements this turn. I could withhold it and use it with these, but, well, maybe. Maybe. I don't know. Because they're different nationalities, so I got to figure out where to get that Hungarian. Anyway, I will try to figure out what to do with the Austrians, but yeah, I'm not getting what I consider reasonable results from the pressure that I initially applied. Now, I like games that are more intuitive than these old-style operational games. Often they require more rules. Something like OCS requires a lot more rules, but you can operate a little bit more intuitively, other than the way artillery works in it. But certainly my tactical games, etc., work a little bit more that way. So all I can bring to this, in terms of playing it, is years and years of experience of playing games kind of like this, and this one's not reacting the way I expect, and that's frustrating. However, that may be where my blind spot is, somewhere along there, But add to that it is a fairly simple operational style game with a lot of shaky points in it that leads me to wonder, well, maybe what I'm missing is something that was intended to be written into the rules but wasn't, or something along those lines. I just don't know. At these replacements here, up to 3 of them can entrain. That may allow me to get a little bit closer, because otherwise it's going to be a long fucking march up to the Tarnopol region. I also have to try to protect against an advance down here by these Russians. Of course, whatever line the Russians follow, I have to keep track of every single hex that they move through for individual hex control, because otherwise line of supply can't be traced through it. Again, that's usually not handled this way, and it feels like an undue burden, along with many. This game, if played strictly according to the way it's written, feels much more mechanically complicated, in terms of I'm going to have to start, marking individual hexes with little counters or something to indicate control. Yeah. I don't know why I came back. I had something to say, but I lost it. This is the solution I'm coming up with, some little counters to throw, just to indicate paths of control where necessary. I got no idea here. I'm just kind of assuming that everything was taken, but I don't know. And can dummies control territory? Again, that creates a weird situation again. I would say yes, consider them to be small forces that are operating, but man, I don't know. Because they are a limited resource and everything. It's not like there's dummies all over the map. Hey, figure out what you got. Yeah. And again, it's up to your interpretation or whatever, but in the hidden movement section, it doesn't talk about whether dummies have a zone of control. They won't work if they don't. Like, if they don't have one, they're no longer all that hidden. And usually games have some sort of mechanism to provide for that. Like, well, you can ask, can I trace supply in some games? And the enemy would say, yes, you are still in supply, even though you don't look like you are. In this case, though, you would have to halt your movement when moving next to a dummy, I guess, and maybe it would disappear the dummy if it's the only unit there, maybe not. again, this kind of stuff has to be spelled out, or you're leaving it up to the players to make their decision, which, given that I would say, you know, look, if you're an old-timer gamer like me, and you have games that are kind of similar to this, yeah, you can make those kind of determined decisions, and it's not that big a deal. Although, given that I am either not getting the game or I think it's broken, in terms of, like, you know, not getting reasonable results out of that initial advance, I'm left with kind of well, maybe I shouldn't be the person making these decisions. Like, I should either give it up because it's broken, or I'm not getting it and I'm not qualified to make these kind of decisions within it. But what's certainly not going to be the case is that the kind of person who doesn't have games like this already and maybe needs something at this level, a little bit lighter than Tannenberg, it seems like, although some of that lightness is at the cost of ambiguities and holes, isn't really going to be able to get an advantage out of it. Now, you know, Great War in the East, you know, getting the boxed version of that's a big expense to find used. But getting the magazine version of Tannenberg is not. Probably you can get it for as little, you know, the same price that you'd be paying for this or less. There's also, you know, Avalon Hill games, but not on this kind of subject matter. So, you know, you might be able to find the folio version of the Galicia. But it is a little bit more complex. So, I don't know. Anyway, I'm just feeling very frustrated in general by this. Final Austrian position for the first movement phase is trying to get myself some kind of at-J here to crack there. Maybe something in here. I don't know. You've got a big heavy pile here that maybe I can get an attack, but I'm not going to be able to surround it. And I'm not really sure that it's worth doing, but what the hell? I got to try to bust through and get some of these big victory point spaces, or else I'm in trouble. Meanwhile, I don't know, I saved a movement point here because I couldn't think of anything better to do. And I got this dummy. I could bring that on. No, that's crappy terrain. It's going to cost me too much. Now, are these German units with a movement allowance of 3? They're neither German nor Russian. My feeling is that since the Austrian infantry has that 2 movement point allowance in general that the Russians have, I'm going to play it as though it's Russian because that just makes sense. So that's where that thing's moving. And I've fallen back here because I can't afford to face this army. And I probably ought to unflip a couple of these units because I shouldn't be seeing that. And I guess we do the second movement phase because I'm not able to launch a first move against any of the positions I was in. I'm not able to launch an attack on the first move that is as effective as if I can move twice before I can launch my attack. So all that kind of 2-pulse movement combat and stuff, that's not coming into play. Now, I'm not disparaging anything for that. I think that's okay. Why is it okay? I could save some movement on this. Would that help me? If I save 2 movement points on this, I would have 4. That's still not going to get me in a position where I can surround this. Yeah. The 2-pulse movement system, I with combat in between and after, that works perfectly fine, I think. And if you've got the resources to take advantage of it, it will work. There's not a lot of counters for the board, though. And until we get to these forces kind of maybe coming into play or something, I haven't seen a use for it yet, which is okay. I've deployed some vague approximations of hex control where it lays, and I'll have to do the opposite as the Russians come charging in as well. At least we didn't get too far, right? And I mean, this went through here, so, oh geez, I don't know what the hell is up there. I mean, there's something tracing up along here, and I gotta put some counters there. But let's take care of our attacks. This is the ugly one that I might not want to do, but at least I got some cav on it. So that's 6, 13. Oh, I only have one artillery there. Or no, I must have gotten rid of this. 6, 16 with something to cancel out the woods. 16 to 7. That puts me on a 2-to-1 attack at even. Now 2-to-1 at even, 1, 2, 3. The attacker is going to have to retreat on a 1. Let's see if 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, you know, I can take the retreat 3. I'm okay with that. So let's just do this attack. And I'm at even, yeah. That's a 2 on the 2-to-1. 1, 2. The defender has to retreat a hex. This doesn't really hurt the defender much. Do I want to advance? It looks like it puts me in a weaker position across the board. However, maybe we'll tempt the Russians into something stupid somehow. I don't know. And we got this hex too, so I guess like this, except I was there, so we move a piece there. Wait, no, that doesn't work. I don't know. We own this hex. Let me put something there. Getting these little ones is hard. I'll figure that out later. All right, on to the next one. Well, these guys are surrounded. At least I got that. 3, 6, 11, 19 with a bonus against 5. So that's 3-to-1 only. Swamp means total of +1 with the artillery. So 3-to-1 with a +1. Make it 3-to-1 at even because it's surrounded. No supply. Surrounded, not no supply. So 3-to-1, a 4. Attacker has to retreat. Well, that blows. But it may fix my supply situation. And that means the defender could advance. Now, one of the dangers is I moved a rail unit up there. There's some possibility that rail unit could be eliminated. I had to take a chance and move it because of the 0.2 movement costs, etc. I had to expend that. Yeah. Otherwise, I could have just moved it infinite and detrained, entrained, moved it infinite, detrained, and I'm in place, and then I could have moved it, you know, into one of these attacks or whatever. But again, the terrain effects chart seems to imply something different than the rules there. So you can't do that by my reading. 10, 19, 25 to 4. 25 to 4 is going to be the big 6-to-1, and I cancel out the woods, and that's it. I get a nice 2. I'm getting some good rolls here. Defender 3, that's going to be a kill on the Russians, so I get 8 more victory points for the Austrians. Of course, the goal for a victory is so high in this game, and now this kind of painful mechanical aspect of rolling for each lost unit. 1, 2, 3, 4. And 5. This is the only hex I could advance into. Kind of don't want to. Everything's in a good place. You know, otherwise I'm going to be compacting my formation more. Well, maybe these guys. These guys will fall back. Now, technically, I own probably these 2 hexes. I got to figure all that out. This is where things end at the end of 2 turns. None of the goals have been achieved yet. That's okay. But I'm also not really getting close to them, except maybe right here at Lutsk. Now that's worth 50 points, though. That's a lot of fucking points, right? So reaching any of the goals is a big bonus, which forces you onto the offensive with Conrad in a way that maybe isn't wise overall. Point-wise, otherwise, we're kind of playing along the line. It's hard to tell. I'm going to have to pay attention. So all these hexes that I've marked here, these are each worth a victory point each by turn 12. I currently control a couple of these, but I could lose control of them, and I don't have an easy way to mark that. So I'm going to need a different kind of marker in addition to the I currently control to the I have controlled before. Now, one way to do that is just to write down all the hex numbers, but man, that's crazy shit. And it would be fine for just these, but for all the setup hexes, that's getting ridiculous, right? And yeah, and same thing here. I've moved into some of the setup hexes. Those are worth a victory point each. I don't know. If the tide of the battle were not somewhat confusing, you know, there's no assurance in either of these cases that the Austrians are going to stay there or be repulsed, rather than that the battle is going to wave back and forth across them. So again, that's a painful burden for keeping track of the victory points. And that's core rules. You don't get around that, you know. Between that and the control of hexes, those two things together, they're both core rules, and they are imposing this huge burden on play as far as I can see. To the extent that if this wasn't a fucking review copy, I'd be stopping at this point. I really would be. I feel like I have to give it a little bit more chance, but this is so damn annoying. It's not quite the unplayable level that Chosen was, something I played a while back, where just the stacks of units were just too ridiculous to cope with, and you know, the firepower values and everything in it were just obnoxious. But this is getting close. The fact that I have to use 2 different sets of counters to indicate what hexes, or 2 different sorts of markings to indicate what hexes I'm currently in control of and that I have ever walked through until turn 12. If it was a shorter amount of time, you know, like the first 4 turns or something, it wouldn't be as painful. I'm kind of at the point where I'm thinking, maybe I'll just make a fucking estimate, you know, and say, yeah, you know, I got like 6 of those setup hexes or something so far, and just try to guess at each turn, you know, whether it gets bigger or smaller or something. But it just, I don't know. It's not good. It's not good. Very painful. Anyway, that's it for this video. I'm going to send this one up because people may want to start bailing soon before I go into a full-on rant.